Hey everyone, welcome back to an all new episode of Plan on It with attorney Christopher Botti, the board certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. I'm your host, Mike Leon. Chris has more than 30 years of experience helping individuals and families plan for long term care and protect what they've built. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how Chris's firm approaches estate planning and why the right structure makes all the difference in the world for California families out there. Chris, it's good to see you as always. So let's talk about when somebody actually does come to the firm for the first time. Let's say it's me. I'm coming to the firm. I don't live in California, but I'm coming to the firm. I heard about Chris Botti. How do you define for them what a complete and effective estate plan includes?
Well, good to see you, Mike. Thank you. A complete or comprehensive estate plan, as I like to call it, includes a series of documents that work together synergistically. If you have an estate that would otherwise go through probate, you would want a living trust as the document that decides where things go when you pass on. You'd include in a comprehensive plan, of course, powers of attorney, one for finance, one for healthcare, and other documents that are designed synergistically to work and deal with two issues: one, death, and the other, incapacity. And the biggest enemy of estate planning is procrastination. And a lot of people think the process is difficult to complete or do. And I don't believe it should be. I think estate planning should not be hard to do. And the way we approach it makes it easy for our clients to get through the process, because it's the opposite of a do-it-yourself project when you engage us to help you.
So let me ask you on that front, because you said the word documents, and I'm sure there's a lot of families out there that assume estate planning is just a gazilla amount of documents, right? Gazillions of documents. So how do you kind of describe to them the entire process itself, like the conversations we're going to have with other family members, designated agents, the education? Like how do you put it all together, soup to nuts?
Well, basically, the process starts with when the client reaches out to us to say, "I'm interested in doing some estate planning." We'll book that first interaction, that first appointment with a lawyer, and we'll ask a client to fill out a workbook, basically to put together information about their family, their assets, their wishes, who they want to be in charge if something happens to them, where they want it to go. Because at the end of the day, all these documents, and there's a bunch. I mean, there's a significant amount of documents because attorneys work their magic with paper. That's the bottom line. And we only buy blank paper. But if you distill it down to its essence, all these documents are about two things and two things only: who's in charge of what and when, and who gets what and when. And if you approach it with that mindset, I need to understand those critical components, you'll get through the process a lot easier. Yes, there's going to be legalese in this paperwork. It has to be there for the documents to work their magic. But at the end of the day, it's about who's in charge of what and when, and who gets what and when. And we tell our clients to focus on those issues. And if they're correct and you understand that, then you're like 98% of the way there. And the legalese is there for a reason. We'll be happy to explain it to you, but don't get hung up on that. It needs to be there.
It's a great way to think about it for folks out there that are listening. But I did want to ask you, because we've talked about this in previous episodes about California and their unique rules, especially probate, community property, taxes. So how do some of those issues in your state kind of influence the way the firm builds an estate plan for that client?
Well, I always tell a client at the very beginning of that first meeting is that the more we know about your family and its dynamic, the better we can protect everything you've worked your entire life to accumulate. So, community property laws, they weave into the issue of how you design your estate plan if you're a married couple. So we need to know like what your ultimate goals are. And then, of course, taxes can be an issue. There's multiple taxes that are impacted by estate planning. There's property taxes, there's capital gains taxes, there's estate taxes. And so all those issues are dealt with and is part of designing in a plan. And then so the goal is to gather information and have a conversation and really get to know the people that you're potentially going to do the work for and know their family dynamic, which is really important because, families who have, interesting dynamics because of challenges, whether they be blended families or children who have issues, whether because of substance abuse problems or creditor issues. We need to know all this information because if we know this information, we can design a plan that's going to protect our clients' assets and ultimately lead to peace of mind, knowing it's going to work out when these documents are called upon to act.
Chris, speaking of protecting the assets, we've talked about this before with wills and trust and how trust really do or seem like such a good option.
Right.
But the other part of this is funding that trust, keeping the plan updated. A lot of the times families tend to kind of like need guidance around that. Like how does the firm help ensure that the plan is working for the family correctly over time?
that goes down to the relationships you have with your clients. And I tell my clients, again, early in the process, look, the reason why I'm attracted to this area of law is because I develop long-term lasting relationships with my clients, not only them, but their family members. And so I encourage them to stay in touch with us. In other words, if you have questions down the road, of course, we're going to help with the initial funding. We're going to guide them through that process. We're going to give them written instructions for how to fund the trust in terms of all the different types of assets that they have. But at the end of the day, we are not monitoring what they're doing once they leave our office and the documents have been signed. So we try to stress upon them the need to check in with us every so often so that we make sure your trust is properly funded. Because essentially a trust is a stack of paper, right? A stack of paper without assets, a trust without assets is essentially worthless. And so you must fund the trust correctly and maintain it on a go-forward basis. And so we provide that service to our clients. We want them to stay in touch. We do a lot of our outreach through our website and through podcast program like this one and our blog and newsletter program. So our job is to stay in touch with our clients on a go forward basis. We expect them to stay in touch with us so they don't make funding mistakes down the road. It's really important because when you make a funding mistake, it could end up potentially having a probate problem, which is the whole reason why we're doing this, is to avoid that procedure. So it's critical that, relationships are long-term in nature. And I value that. That's the most important part of this. My job is maintaining these long-term relationships with our clients.
Well, Chris, speaking of those clients, let's share a story, maybe a family that you've worked with where thoughtful planning, not just all the documents that we talked about, but it truly made a meaningful difference in how everything unfolded, either demise, incapacity, et cetera.
Well, the biggest compliment we can get, this is either like, a married couple after one spouse dies. And, of course, you have to go through the grieving process. But at the end of the day, what legal obstacles you face. And then after a single client passes on, the same thing, we are contacted by the successor trustee. And the biggest compliment we can get was, it was so easy. It worked as planned. And I'm so happy we did this. And that's like the greatest reward I can receive, is when I know when they're called upon to act, these documents are working their magic. And so we see this time and time again. When clients pass on, the successor will reach out to us and say, I'm so glad they did this.
Let me ask you about that, because going according to plan, life doesn't always go according to plan, right? You got blended families, remarriages. How do you help clients also think about those type of issues that could pop up without feeling overwhelmed, because they are difficult conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do a lot of blended family planning. And so I tell clients, look, my job, number one, is to do what you ultimately want to accomplish. Like, they come in with these ideas. This is what we want to see happen when we pass on. This is how we want to have our assets distributed. And so I will say, okay, we can do that. But I also want you to understand that, how is this going to affect the people you leave behind? So you need to know the implications of what you're doing in terms of how it affects your family and the people you leave behind. So with blended family planning, it's important to make sure that each side of the family has some type of voice or representation in the estate plan, so that they feel like they're not being left out. So at the initial stage of the process, we go through a workbook, and in that workbook, we're going to spend significant time on these blended family planning issues. For example, we want co-trustees, where each family has a representative to serve as the trustee, the fiduciary, in the event of death and incapacity. So all these issues come up, and it's important, like I said, that we know what the dynamic is. Like, are they going to get along? Are there potential troublemakers out there? So I expect my clients to really just air it out. I'm going to be listening, and I'm listening for red flags. What potentially can go south if you don't deal with it correctly in your estate plan?
Chris, on that front, what have you seen that tends to surprise people the most once they realize the true coordination effort that's involved in all this? What are some things that have popped up that have surprised people? Is it beneficiary designations? Is it some tax stuff that you mentioned earlier?
I think, when you get into it and you actually take a deep dive into it and start going through the process, the surprises for most people is, I didn't think it was going to be this easy. Like, there's a fear that estate planning is difficult and complicated and intimidating, and that leads to procrastination. I mean, procrastination is the number one enemy of estate planning. So most of my clients are really pleasantly surprised that the process was easy the way we do it, because basically what my philosophy is, we're not standing in front of you. We're sitting beside you, holding your hand, guiding you through this process. And if you allow us to help you through the process, you can't use the excuse it's hard to do. So most of my clients, the most common reaction we get when they complete the process is surprised that it wasn't that difficult to do. And sometimes you have difficult situations. And the goal as an attorney and counselor, is to counsel people through those difficult situations and design a plan that's going to work based upon those situations.
Well, Chris, as we kind of wrap on this episode, how about the listener right now that's maybe just beginning this process? How would you advise them in terms of choosing a firm, an attorney like yourself? What should they be looking for about someone that will help them guide them through this process?
Well, here's the thing about this paperwork, whether it's, the trust and all the other documents that make up a comprehensive estate plan. If they don't work as intended, you'll never find out, because either you're incapacitated or you're dead. The time to do this kind of planning is when you have your wits about you and you want it done by someone who knows what they're doing. There's a lot of noise out there being generated by non-lawyers that, this is everything you've worked your entire life to accumulate. Do you want to leave it up to having it being done by someone who's not qualified to do it? So I think it's critically important that you have a qualified lawyer draft your estate plan, because there's too much at stake, and you'll never find out if it's done wrong. And if it's done wrong, it's going to end up in probate court and end up costing more money to fix the problem that could have been easily been dealt with if it was designed correctly when you get it, when the documents are inadequate. So it's not a difficult process to go through. If you allow someone to help you, you can get through it. You just have to confront your mortality, and you have to just start the process. And once you start the process, you'll be surprised how easy it is to get through it.
Start the process. Chris, thanks as always for the time, the insights. I appreciate it, my friend.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Mike. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Plan on It with attorney Christopher Botti. If you want to connect with Chris and his team, do me a favor right now, visit boddylaw.com. And one more favor, as always, like, subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. We will see everybody next time.